Good morning, dear FIBO Global friends. Welcome to the CEO webinar on how the landscape is changing. My name is Herman Rutger and I will be your moderator today. We're very honored to have three top CEOs from European fitness sector operators presenting today, each coming from a very different perspective. We have Jonathan Fisher, CEO of Holmes Place Group, representing various brands in different segments of the market in 9 countries. We have Stefan Tilk, a very seasoned executive in our industry who has run Fitness First in Germany for over 10 years and who is now CEO of a startup of the world's largest operator, but a newcomer to the German market, Anytime Fitness. And last but not least, we have the CEO of the 6th largest operator by number of members in Europe, FitX from Germany, Mr. Markus Vancraeyenest. We will have a Q&A session after the 3 speakers, so please use the Q&A function on your Zoom screen to pose questions to either of the presenters. Also, please note this event will be recorded and can be reviewed later on the FIBO website. But before I turn over to the panelists, I would like to ask Silke Frank, FIBO event director, to say a few words of welcome. So Silke, the mic and the screen are all yours.
Thank you, Herman. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm very pleased to welcome you today. Our online seminars, which we regularly hold here, have become an important medium for our industry. These events show how important it is to exchange experience right now and to take a current look at the trends of the future. These trend updates are important because the corona crisis is currently accelerating many developments. We can see, for example, how the megatrend health has once again gained enormously in importance in recent weeks. The corona crisis has awakened the awareness of many people for more health, more sport and fitness as a balance in the current situation, but also for health promoting prevention. We have been observing the trends towards more health for some time now. However, the extent and speed of the changes are surprising. Changes that would otherwise probably have taken years are now reduced to a few weeks. And it is to be expected that the changed behavior and the new awareness will outlive the pandemic. This development, for example, the increasing importance of health-oriented training, will have a positive impact on demand in the fitness and health industry and also on FIBO. It will be exciting to see how we can take this momentum into our future. How is the landscape changing is therefore the question we are discussing today. I look forward to the discussion and welcome again all participants in this round. A big thank you again at this point to you, Herman, as you guide us through these exciting seminars every time. But before we start, just a brief note on FIBO. Last week we presented our Hygiene and Infection Protection e-paper, under which this year's FIBO will be held in October. What is the admission situation and what is the situation at the stands? What hygiene precautions are we taking in the exhibition halls? All details are available on our website. This new setup finally gives all those involved the planning security we have been waiting for a long time. This means that the exhibitors are currently planning the concrete stand construction for the trade fair. We ourselves are already in the final stages of implementing our own spaces. With this concept, nothing stands in the way of a secure FIBO in October. So much for that. Now I am looking forward to the exchange and discussion in today's round. Thank you.
Thank you, Silke. I would like to add to that of course everybody is very welcome to come on September 30, which is the day before FIBO opens on October 1st, to the European Health and Fitness Forum, for which you can see soon the final program on the website. So put that in your calendar, September 30 in Cologne. Hope to see you there. So now it's my pleasure to introduce Jonathan Fisher, a very seasoned executive in our industry, experience in many countries, in different segments of the market, in the premium segment, the middle segment, the budget sector, and he's operating in many, many countries. So he will have a very interesting perspective to offer to us. So Jonathan, the floor is all yours.
Thank you, Herman, for the invitation, and thank you, Silke, thank you, FIBO, for the invitation to speak and share. I think, this topic is about landscapes, and when thinking about viewing a landscape, it's clear that your your view of how the landscape appears and how it changes depends on where you're sitting or where you're standing, your position. So hopefully the perspective that I have is going to provide some new insights for you, because I think a lot of the messages that are coming through now are very similar. I believe there's some degree of consensus around the situation at the moment. So we can move to the next slide. So the group that I'm the CEO of operates across 9 different countries. You can see we've been leveraging over 40 years of experience, starting with our Holmes Place brand. We currently have 131 clubs, 40 of which are owned and 91 are licensed or franchised. And we run that across 4 different brands. There's definitely a perspective that you get from operating in different countries, and I'll choose a couple today to focus in on that hopefully will provide some interesting perspective. So moving to the next slide, from the outset of this crisis, as it happened, both internally and externally, I started speaking about agility. In a crisis, the speed of decision making is, I believe, crucial to really surviving and making through very challenging times. The landscape or the information that we get and the changes of circumstances can be so quick that you really need to streamline the decision-making process so that you can respond rapidly. And that's not just in your decision-making process, but it's also, I believe, in your communication process, which needs to be prompt. And I've been advising transparent. I believe that really helps. And we're still very much in crisis, I would say. Perhaps the expression of the crisis is changing. And so I still believe that this agility and this requirement to be prompt with and transparent with one's communication is really important. Emerging from lockdown, however, I started to communicate about 3 points to help us going forward. And if we move to the next slide, these 3 points are essentially recapitalize, digitalize, and strategize. And we can move immediately to the next slide, which is about recapitalize. And the point about recapitalize is that for businesses, this crisis will convert itself sooner or later into a cash crisis or a potential cash crisis for your company. And in that regard, not only in terms of survival, but also in terms of being able to thrive in this environment, there's, I think, fairly convincing documentation around and research that companies that emerged out of the last sort of crisis, economic crisis, albeit in 2008 and 9, the companies that did really well had the common factor of good liquidity and a strong capital base. So whether it be through existing shareholders or new shareholders or M&A or transactions, strong recommendation to recapitalize. And then the next point, moving to the next slide, is digitalize. And there's been a huge amount spoken about this factor of our landscape, which clearly has changed. And as several commentators have said, and I fully agree with that, it's not so much that there's been change, but there's been acceleration of change which was already afoot. Many of us have been grappling with how to digitalize our businesses over the last 5 years, but what took place due to a circumstance that was forced upon us is that accelerated, and I think from a very important way, it became consumer-led. Because consumers were not able to consume fitness in a physical setting, then the digital setting started to become a consumer-led change. In Portugal, where we have a very strong brand presence in the Holmes Place brand, we were caught unprepared for the degree of digital demand and our ability to monetize that. And we made a decision to provide all of our digital content and services, live or pre-recorded, for free to the public on social media channels. And we had some very interesting results on that. we had a huge uptake in 2.5 months. We had over 5.6 million views through our social media channels of our digital content. And the fascinating thing about that is that since the Portuguese clubs have reopened, which took place on the 1st of June, so almost a month, we've seen no slowdown in the viewing of our digital content. So it's a fascinating insight, which I'll touch more upon later. But certainly the question of how to start monetizing the digital content and services that are being made available to the public, and how to monetize that brand equity in that space are certainly questions that we're addressing and grappling with. But Digitalize in this changing landscape clearly has moved from a preference, from a wise and prudent thing to do to a must-have. And that's both from a defensive perspective and, if you like, if we're using this analogy, an attacking perspective for growth reasons as well. From the defensive side, you know, if there are second waves and third waves that cause lockdown, because there may be second and third waves that just cause increased restrictions, but if lockdown comes again, then we need to be ready with our digital content in a way that we can monetize it, because it would really be inexcusable to go back into a lockdown without the ability to generate revenues through digital channels. So I believe that we've really entered into what's being called an omni-channel phase, and I'll touch on that later. So moving to the third of the 3 points, which is strategize. You know, a changing landscape, you know, I argue has to be looked at through a strategic lens. You know, if you take, for example, the whole digital development and the digital part of the sector, one of my colleagues and peers, he calls it the digital soup, because it's everybody's doing everything. And so even, for example, in the digital sphere, we need to take a strategic approach. And going into this crisis, you know, all businesses and companies should have a very clear strategy. And I understand strategy as simply put being a series of choices about, you know, where to play and how to win in the marketplace. You know, taking from A.G. Lafley's, you know, seminal book about playing to win, which I recommend everyone to read if you're not feeling confident about your own strategy. And if you did have a strategy going into this crisis, then as you emerge out of it, if you just need to question whether your underlying premises and insights of your strategy have not fundamentally changed. Because if they haven't fundamentally changed, then I'm advocating that businesses should stay in their lane. If they have fundamentally changed, then certainly they should be reviewed. So I'm going to look at these 3 points really through the lens of a boutique brand that we operate, which is called Tribe. So if we move to the next slide. So Tribe you know, clearly had a strategy going into this crisis. You know, simply put, you know, it had made choices of where to play and how to win. As this slide said, it's a purpose-designed, one studio, sort of one workout, hit workout, very inclusive, very focused on creating communities and everything they do, but a very simple and compelling business model, scalable for franchise. And so it had a very clear strategy going into the crisis. And the first thing it did, and its executive team did very well, in my opinion, is it immediately made the necessary moves to recapitalize. And they did it actually by going back to its shareholders and sufficiently recapitalize the business so that they could use the time during close down to really work on improving the infrastructure of the business and repositioning the business and making it more attractive coming out of the lockdown period. So, like many of the major operators, it did find itself relatively unprepared to pivot into the digital business. It wasn't in a position to charge for digital offerings. It went to work immediately on building a real strategy for digital, at the same time as providing classes digitally on social media channels. And moving to the next slide, you know, I believe when building strategy, and developing strategy, it's really useful to go back to your target market. And the tribe team are very good at that. And they go back to what they call their tribers. And they basically ask them about digital. And two very clear results came back from those questions that were asked of the tribers. And the first one is that 49%, so almost 50% of that target market were basically saying that they intend to come back to use the studio, and they intend to add digital fitness or virtual fitness to it. And the second big insight that the tribe team got was that almost 50% as well were saying that they intend to do virtual classes or digital classes with gyms or studios that they've used before. So there was a very clear pointer towards the connectivity between the physical experience and the digital experience. And again, that leads to the omni-channel experience. And if we move to the next slide, there's a representation here of what this omni-channel experience looks like for Tribe. And the key point here is that all three experiences, and I'll go into them in a second, but they're all integrated within the Tribe heart rate monitor system. That system basically builds a currency of sweat points, and the heart rate monitor system, the feedback that it's giving to the triber, the sweat points that are accumulated, all are integrated into the Tribe journey. So whether it's Tribe at home, which is basically free Tribe content through social media channels, or whether it's through the studio, where you have the physical bricks and mortar experience, or whether it's through Tribe Live, which is the paid for live workouts through digital channels, you're having the same experience, or there's an integration of the Tribe things through the experience. And this is what we're calling the omni-channel, meaning whatever channel you're taking, you're getting that Tribe experience. So moving to the next slide, having sort of built a strategy around digital, taking a step back and looking at the strategy overall for Tribe, there was a question of, well, are our underlying assumptions at Tribe still relevant and valid? And in analyzing that, we came to the conclusion that yes, they are. Fundamentally speaking, we see that there is still a very strong desire and even stronger need, if you like, to socialize through the fitness offerings. There's still definitely a desire for an experience and not just a workout. And there's definitely a continued desire for flexibility of usage and payment options, which is one of the pillars through which sort of boutique has developed over the last 5 years. And finally, that there still remains a big desire for physical community in an increasingly digital world. So having checked those assumptions, those fundamental assumptions that we felt were still relevant and still made our business model relevant, we took a look at the opportunities that are in place as a result of this changing landscape. I believe that some of these opportunities, if we move to the next slide, are relevant for many different operations, and some of these are clear and have been spoken about for some time now, but we've been taking advantage of an increased availability of properties and at more attractive terms. So for example, Tribe currently has 6 studios in place, and by the end of the year we'll have opened another 7 studios already in the Spanish and the UK markets. So we've signed those leases already, taking advantage of a very good time if you want to actually go ahead and grow your business. There are definitely opportunities for acquisition and consolidation, and I'm recommending everybody to keep their ears and eyes open in whichever way you would approach that M&A possibility. And unfortunately speaking, it's my estimation that it could be as many as 1 in 5 gyms or fitness offerings will not make it through this crisis. And that means that there's going to be less supply. And as Silke mentioned in her introduction, there will be an increased demand due to awareness. And with the economic recession and instability going through, we see the franchise model. I'm sure Stefan will speak very well about it. I think the franchise model is a very prudent model for people looking to start businesses in this uncertain time. So getting to the coming out of lockdown and moving to the next slide, if only we could assume that the ramp up back to where we were as a business would be as quick as this little ramp that this little guy is about to go down. I think the ramp up's going to take a lot longer. There's been some evidence both outside of our group and also within our group that you can get up to sort of 90% of usage as quickly as within 3 months. I think that's a combination of members using it more because they've got perhaps more time at the moment and because there was a backlog. I would definitely want to caveat that in Europe, I think the summer months are really going to hinder progress around usage building up in that way. And maybe in the months of September and October, we'll see that usage sort of going back up. But there, of course, is a very big difference between usage statistics and revenue statistics. And I believe that it will take between 12 to 24 months to get back to revenues that we were pre-COVID. I think it's important to be prudent around that, both for your cash flow scenarios and for your negotiations with your stakeholders. And the last bit that I would say, which is just an interesting insight that we're picking up on, is whilst we've seen, of course, a big drop in our PT revenue, what we're seeing a really substantial increase from the ability to offer and sell personal training to new joiners. So there's an increased demand in that regard. So next slide, at the moment, I'm spending a huge proportion of my time trying to restructure leases. And the pointer that I would share is that our preferred route for restructuring is to try and convince our landlords that a percentage of revenue is the preferred option. It gives them upside should the ramp up be quicker, and it protects us on downside for second and third waves, which could lead to greater restrictions and possibly even lockdowns into the future. So that's my recommendation, and of course to compensate landlords with lease extensions or phased paybacks. So really there's an art of negotiation and communication, and really to invest in that activity would be my advice. So to sum up on the next slide, if we take a look at the changing landscape, to sum up and just to throw in something new, clearly omni-channel is now not a nice to have, it's a must to have. I think consolidation is going to definitely emerge in this changing landscape, and I think strong brands will emerge stronger. As Silke mentioned, there's definitely has been and will be a growth in the health aspect of the offering, and according to that as well, I'm predicting a very strong growth in plant-based nutrition in the equation of health. And then it would be remiss of me not to conclude this presentation with, I believe, what is a very important point when understanding the changing landscape. And if we move to the next slide, instead of, if you read this quote, instead of geniuses, put in the word leaders. And I think everybody's a leader in some sort of format. And what I'm saying here is that we're in a very, very difficult situation, huge suffering and dislocation in our socio and economic structures. And not only must we be better prepared and more resilient for similar such events into the future, but we must tackle the root causes of these occurrences so that we can prevent them from happening. And on the next slide, it's been clear that the proximate causes for this pandemic have been the wildlife trade, It's connected with intensive animal agriculture and the destruction of habitats and ecosystems. So, leaders really need to address these things so that we're not going to have to fight these battles on an ongoing basis. And if you just move to the next slide, in many ways we would be wise to see this whole crisis as a precursor for similar or even worse interruptions. The interruptions that we could see to our socio-economic structures due to climate change and antibiotic immunity are very, very profound and serious. And we should be taking similarly very serious measures around climate change. So for me, on the next slide, it's all summed up with sustainability. And I believe that sustainability is something that must change in our changing landscape. And it just basically means behavior that doesn't lead to crisis and discontinuity. So I believe that this is really the change in the landscape that we should see going forward. So thank you for your attention. And as we say in Holmes Place on the next slide, even though it's challenging and tough, we can do it whilst enjoying the journey. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Jonathan. I really enjoyed the journey of your presentation. Some very insightful points there, which we'll come back later in the Q&A. There's already a question I see coming in for you based on what you said. So going from Portugal, we're going to Germany. Stefan Tilk is the next presenter from Anytime Fitness Germany, who has a very interesting story to tell about a startup in very challenging times. Stefan, the screen and mic is all yours.
Herman, thank you very much. I hope that you can hear me well.
Yes.
When Herman asked me to be part of this panel, of course, I had to face a big challenge, being squeezed in between two elephants. What are you going to do as a mouse? Now, I'm not supposed to tell the same things that Jonathan have rightly spoken about. So I will try to find a different niche on giving you some insights in what is happening in the world of Anytime Fitness Germany. And I clearly state this is about Anytime Fitness Germany. I'm not the representative of Anytime Fitness Worldwide, which is a completely different business setup. And it's going to be a story about a company, a startup business, as Herman has described rightly so, who has been with the right product and service, with the right team at the right place at the absolute wrong time. We have chosen, not deliberately, but we have chosen a time which couldn't have been worse, and I tell you a little bit about this later on. I have come from a big company. I have worked for Fitness First for quite some time. As Herman said before, I've worked for other big corporations in other industries. So for me, it was a tremendous change to go from a company like Fitness First at the end, with about 150 million in revenues, 3,500 staff, to a startup business. Because at the end of the day, what we did is we acquired the franchise rights for Anytime Fitness in Germany, Austria, and Switzerland with a business partner of mine last year. As you can understand, every country basically works on itself. So we are a small business and we have to finance our activities within Germany, where we are starting now, all on ourselves. So we acquired the rights from LLC brands in the United States, and we had to build up the whole setup for ourselves over the last year, which have substantially cost us investments. So it's not just given that you take over a brand from a franchise partner and then you start basically fully monted. Now, on the next slide, I will just give you an overview on what this big worldwide Anytime Fitness looks like. It's still a one family business. It's Dave and Chuck, two owners who are still running the business. They are still majority holders. They are only in the market for the last 17 years, which I believe is quite a success story because it's not that much of time. The company by now worldwide is running more than 4,800 clubs and therefore is one of the biggest franchise operating fitness companies in the world. They are having about 3 million members plus, acting in more than 30 countries. That's, by the way, quite interesting because they haven't been in Germany, although Germany is supposed to be one of the most attractive markets in the world, at least in Europe. And therefore, we were quite proud last year when they came up saying, okay, with you guys, we are up to do that investment. So at the end of the day, it is the #1 anytime franchise fitness network in the world with a very strong franchise business, also from a financial point of view. So very high success rate in the franchise world. Now we came up then at the beginning of this year. If you go to the next slide, I just show you some impressions. So there is physically something happening. So it's not that we are just having looks at PDF PowerPoint presentations the whole time. We have built a club. We have built a club, and we have worked a lot on the design. We have worked on the product and service proposition, which for us was very important. The slogan was basically from convenience to coaching. People who know the Anytime Fitness brand around the globe knows that they are very much in the convenience spot. And we said that we cannot be successful in Germany if we are just relying on convenience. We have to serve a lot more coaching elements. So that is what we worked on, and we finalized everything. And we're planning the opening for the 4th of April of this year. So next slide, you can see that this was not just the opening idea of one club, of course. The business plan still remains that we are trying to build up a hub and spoke model, which is basically telling you that you have one big club, which is most likely always a corporate club of our own, and then try to find franchise partner around it. You see that we are not even getting close to the big cities. Most of the cities you see on this slide, I even don't know they are so close, so small. They are somewhere between 30,000 and 110,000 people living there, because this is actually where Anytime Fitness Germany wants to be. We don't want to go into the 10 biggest cities because we believe that, first of all, our target group is not well represented there, and second, we think that a competition, especially with companies like Holmes Place, Fitness First, and others, is very, very big. So this is where we want to put our activities into smaller cities. The hub and spoke model has been pretty much already set up. We have got a lot of attractive real estate offers in those markets, and therefore we were actually up and running and very content with what we have achieved over time until April this year. Now, if you go to the next slide, this is actually when the shit hits the fan. And there is another saying, there is a famous boxer, I don't know who it was, he said, you have a strategy until the moment when the punch hits your face. And that's exactly what happened to us. And if you realize that suddenly a little town, GÜTERSLOH, which nobody knows around the globe, is even mentioned in the New York Times, then you know that you might have the next Nobel Prize winner in your hometown, which was not the case, unfortunately, or you're having a pork manufacturing company which is not taking care very much about their staff, which are most likely Bulgarians or Romanians who don't even speak the language. And they have actually created that second biggest pandemic in Germany, which led us not only, let me say, to the first lockdown, which happened in the middle of March, which have been affected a lot of other clubs as well in Germany and around the globe, but we also got the second lockdown just about 10 days ago, which is only for the region of GÜTERSLOH. Now, if you look back at Jonathan's presentation, you have the pride and you have the setup of clubs all around Europe. Then you have a very diverse portfolio. And you can actually try and, let me say, mold around, and if some clubs in one country is more affected than the other, you can still somehow manage. And don't forget, if you have a setup of clubs with membership signed, and I guess that in Europe, basically like in Germany, it's very much based on debit, on direct debit. then there is a certain revenue flow coming in. At least in Germany, the mentality of the people is that they're not immediately canceling their contract. So even though I agree that there is a lot of negative impact on the business, still there is a difference between a company like us trying to build up a business and a brand without any members and got hit right in the middle of their pre-sale. Or there is an existing club that of course has a drop in its revenues because maybe cancellation rates going up slightly, but still there is some inflow, some revenue inflow. So we were hit immediately and directly. We have not done any kind of pre-sale. We have spent a huge amount of money in advertisement, which was for the bin. And that, of course, as a small startup company, was very confusing and irritating. Now, if you go to the next slide, what basically happened, and just listen to me, there's not much that I put on paper. Of course, one of the biggest things that we try to do is to hold the team together. It's a very small team. It's not about hundreds and thousands of people. It's just a small team. It's two handfuls of people, which we actually hired from different industries, from different businesses. They all came, of course, to us right before this whole thing started. So we needed to be very focused on getting them motivated. And don't forget, I mean, we were all the first time, I was the first time confronted with something like social distancing, home office, yeah, in this kind of shape and form. Of course, we all know how to work from home or work from other different places. But I think that the complexity of working only from home was something that we also needed to get used to. Don't forget the hygienic concepts that needed to be installed and needed to be developed. So all of this was going into the team, and we tried to hold the team together. We used all the different tools that are available, so Zoom talks. We created an Anytime Fitness app group for the people. We did virtual team workouts, the team in itself, so not for the public, but also only for us, in order to keep together and take care of the team. So that was one of the biggest focuses that we had in the last couple of weeks and months. The second thing is, and still don't forget, there was the club. We needed to somehow take care of the club environment, which we got organized. Try to get that is very important when you talk about home office. Try to get the rhythm and the routine into this new environment, so that things are going to be worked through and things are going to be optimized, rather than just people sitting at home mowing the lawn or washing their cars. I mean, that is something that, of course, should not happen in such an environment. The second thing is, I think that is also very important, is what kind of support did we get? Now, Jonathan was talking about financial reshuffling or refinancing or recapitalize. I mean, we tried to get as much out of the environment, out of the stakeholders as possible. I mean, and we have been very grateful. First of all, for example, landlord, the one that we are having, he was forgetting about the rent, so we didn't have to pay rent until July now. What we did is, and maybe that was a little bit of a give and take, what we said is that, of course, we are going to pay the utility costs. And what we said is, if you have had any kind of credit facility around our club bills, which he did because he had to install a very heavy AC system, and we said at least we pay the interest rate. So we are not going to pay you the rent, the full rent, but we are willing to pay you the interest. So at least you're not sitting on the capital costs for the investment that you had to do. And that was very much appreciated from this side. So we also said that we need all the support from the vendors. So also here, very grateful. Some of the vendors have been also very positive about, let me say, delaying the payments of leases and everything. And then we used the governmental system that was offered for especially Kurzarbeitergeld. I don't know what the English word is. So they have actually sponsored very heavily the labor costs that we were having. We filled it up slightly, so they were compensated for 60 to 67% of your last net income, and we have been willing then to to fill it up to 80%. That was not 100%, of course, but I think that as a small startup company, that was quite a nice gesture. I think that there are companies out there who did a lot more, which I think is great, but we haven't been able to compensate for more than that. And then, of course, last but not least, but I think is a very important thing, is we are very grateful that our shareholders actually supported us in a way that they did, because a small startup, of course, every shareholder, every investor is defining a point of no return. Every investor has to make up a mind, how long are they going to stick into this and how long are they willing to finance this whole thing? And because this crisis is one out of, nobody knows what the future is going to tell us, and nobody knows when the next lockdown is coming. Of course, they were constantly questioning us on where we want to go with this whole thing. So we are still there, and we are still planning to move on. And as I said, thank you very much to the investors. Last but not least on this slide, we have a very strong support from Anytime Fitness USA or LLC brands. They have come up with tremendous amounts of webinars, of calls in order to support the franchise partners in any kind of form and content. That was very helpful. So that is, of course, nice to be part of a big family. Now, next slide. And I might repeat myself or repeat what Jonathan has said, but it shows that we are pretty much in line, and I don't think that there are big surprises coming up. Because if you go through the world with open eyes, I mean, we all come to the same conclusions. Now, I think that we have tried to push this whole outdoor thing by quite more than we did. We don't create different brands. We are all under the Anytime Fitness brand. But what we try to do is in this, within the social distancing, let me say, possibilities that we had in the framework, we were trying to push outdoor as much as anything else, as much as digital. We believe that it is a hybrid model, that people get to a point, especially over the summer months, where they're actually experiencing outdoor training, which they did already, but they do it in a different form. So we are trying to put a lot of functional training effort into this outdoor, so not just running or whatever, or cycling groups, but also functional training. I know that in big cities, London and so on, that's common sense. It hasn't reached GÜTERSLOH yet, so therefore we are pushing on this very hard. And second, of course, the digital workouts that we have offered, the team itself, let me say, produced in the club and then sent out through the different social media channels, was also pretty well received. What we see is basically that it has been very nicely taken up by members. And don't forget, we didn't have any pre-sale. We had about, 50 members or whatever the number is now. They have heavily used that stuff. They have been very strongly connecting with us. And I think that this will remain. And this is also one big part of the Anytime Fitness, let me say, product and service proposition anyway. But what we also have seen is that there is a pretty big dropout rate from prospects. So a lot of prospects start doing it at the beginning, especially if it's free of charge. So they go into this, but then you see very strong dropout rates. So people actually lose interest after a certain period of time. So I don't think that this, as being a constant offer to the market, if you take money for it or not, doesn't make any difference. I don't think that this is really, let me say, everlasting. I think it is more the combination of everything. It's more the combination of club and digitalization. Digitalization itself does not work, at least not, I think, within our fitness club business. Different thing is Peloton. That might be an idea that people can have a look at, but that's also a combination from digital and let me say offline, in a way that they are selling equipment and somebody has to sit on that bike somewhere. So then we had a very strong communication with our members through the different digital channels, because we weren't able to meet them. I think here, this whole Anytime Fitness app idea is very, very strong. The Anytime Fitness app is actually a two-way kind of idea. It's not about just people get a lot of information and video stuff and content in the app and can book their classes. It's also about a push notification system where actually trainers can individually let me say, get in contact with the members. I think this is what Anytime Fitness has been very strongly developing over the last 18 months, and of course that helped. And the last point here, where we got support from external, was all the digital, let me say, solutions that were offered by either Anytime Fitness USA, who have done a lot of effort here. And then all the other partners that we are running with, whether it's Live Fitness or MyZone or Function. I need to say that we are using MyZone and Function in Anytime Fitness clubs anyway. So we have been already on that way to use a lot of their digital solutions in the club before, and now, of course, even stronger. But there was nothing really new to this. Next slide. I think that if you look at what is the response from the small market that we are looking at, I think that the target group that we are looking at is actually, and this is everything between 35 and 55. So we're not very much into the very young people, and we're not very much into the older ones. And those people have, let me say, experienced this whole thing in our club, the fitness, let me say, offering that we have taken that up as a very good, let me say, also solution for their crisis. So that's actually a very good system. Second is that they have been very strongly responding to our hygienic concept. So they don't call it regulation. I think that the regulation bit of it is not interesting. And of course, the club sometimes looks a little bit strange if you see all these yellow, black marks all over the place where we had to block some of the equipment. But the overall ideas of giving the people, let me say, trust in that we are actually taking care of the hygienic part of their workouts, I think is something that is critical, and this will remain. I think that we will not go back to the situation where we have about 20 people underneath the same shower block. As we have had it in the past. I think there will be a change in the awareness of people for their hygienic environment in a fitness club. So I think that the next time is what I said before. I think that people are trying to, let me say, integrate nature more into their workout habits. So that's very good. I think we can push that very hard on that outdoor thing. And the last thing is about how do we actually organize ourselves in the future. That's more something that goes to our team. It is very interesting to see that there has been a dynamic, especially in a small business like Anytime Fitness as a startup, that actually everyone is doing everything. So for example, the real estate guy who was not able to go out and find real estate was suddenly doing the hygienic concept. And I think that this kind of work spirit, that kind of work, let me say, environment is going to become stronger, that people are going to be by far more agile in what they are doing in an organization, rather than just sitting there and saying, well, this is none of my business, this is somebody else's business. So that for us were a very strong learning, that we can actually rely on teams that are by far more, let me say, by far more agile in trying to pick up work and do things and let things get done. Yeah? So that is a very strong focus. Now, next slide. As I said, we want to push this whole outdoor by far more. We need to integrate that more into outdoor club and digital. So I think it's going to be one big thing that we are going to do together. We need to learn more about the requirements of all the partners we are having, especially franchise partners. So we have not built up our franchise business yet. So there is no franchise partner yet, but I think that those crises are automatically creating a lot more demand than business as usual. We need to understand more about our club teams and our members. Care, at the moment, we are now very strongly, of course, waiting for the opening. The lockdown is now decided and extended for 1 more week. So we are not going to open before 6th of July, unfortunately, and nobody knows really what's going to happen next. So we need to keep the staff engaged and re-engaged when we are opening again. I talked about hygienic standards already, so this is going to be a priority for us in the future. It's going to be a must. It's not something that you can have, you need to have it. I think that the whole fitness consultation, taking into consideration each and every individual need, is going to be by far more in the focus than ever before. I think that we have to take more personalized and individualized care of the members and the prospects. However, we are going to do this, but our fitness consultation at Anytime Fitness, we are trying to put a lot of effort at the beginning of the relationship rather than only in the following months, because I think the more you know at the beginning about your members, the better it is. Then Connect is all about communication. I think that the digital tools are going to help us. I don't think that they're going to replace the communication that you're having with your members. I think they are just one part of it. I think it is the mix. I think that everyone who believes that he can push out communication into social media channels, we are not going to do this. We are using those tools, but we are only using them as side tools to the normal communication that we're going to have with our member in club. I think that in club communication is key, especially in those times. And then, of course, the whole element of coaching, being close to the member, get a better understanding, connect more often than ever before. I think that this is a big chance for us in the future to differentiate ourselves. Now, the last slide, what is the outlook? I think that first of all, the consumer markets are going to be different. I mean, if I look at the beaches in Great Britain, if I look at at certain, let me say, party areas in Stuttgart or Berlin, then I get the impression that the younger people forget the pandemic very quickly. I think maybe Markus have some experiences here, because I think that you are tackling more on the younger people in the fitness community. So I don't know what their behavior is going to be. We feel that the target group we are tackling are going to be very, very conscious about their health and about those, let me say, pandemics that might occur again. I don't think that this is over. I think this was just one one incident that happened. I think there are is more to come. I think that the world needs to understand, and also the fitness industry needs to understand that those incidents could easily happen again, and nobody knows exactly when that's going to happen. So I think that people are going to be much more conscious on how they are actually living their lives and how healthy they are. They also feel at the moment they are actually affected. We suddenly feel that we are affected by something that we can't really judge, and no matter how fit you were before, maybe you haven't been fit enough. So I think that this is one thing. And the second thing is, I believe that this will lead us to a stronger position over time. I don't think that this is going to happen overnight. I don't think that that this whole pandemic is going to go away and then everything goes back to normal. At least not in the let me say in the market we are in. I think that I can't make a prediction when this is going to go. I think that the curve is going to go by far more flattened. But overall, after a certain period of time, I'm absolutely convinced that the positive impact on the industry is going to be even bigger than before the pandemic. Thank you very much. That is my outlook as being a very small startup. So let's see what the next elephant is going to present.
Thank you very much, Stefan, for a very insightful and interesting presentation, and wishing you good luck with reopening hopefully on July 6th and get some more members in. So last but not least, the word is to Markus Vancraeyenest, who is the CEO of FitX, a very large operation in Germany and the #6 club in Europe by number of members. Markus, the screen and floor is yours. Markus, are you there?
Yeah, it should be there now.
Okay. Okay, good.
Sorry. Okay, Herman, yeah, thanks for having me today, and hi to everybody on the screen as well. Jonathan, Stefan, thanks for the insights. I will also try not to double any of the information we just heard. I will try to focus a little bit on our experience during the lockdown and how we managed it, and put a special focus on what we did together with others to be able to reopen the clubs again. And very shortly, let me introduce myself. This elephant's name is Markus Vancraeyenest. This is my 5th year with FitX, and from tomorrow on, it will be my 2nd year as a CEO. And next slide, please. This is us. So this is FitX. We are really a team of fitness enthusiasts still in a growing environment, on working, becoming more and more successful. And next slide. We have been on the market now for 10 years, so we have a quite short history, but we have been quite fast in growing. So we went into the lockdown with 87 clubs, went out of the lockdown with 89 clubs. So we're still working on that. Right now, we still have more than 800,000 members and more than 2,600 employees. And as I said, we are getting up every day to change the world of fitness with a team that only knows one direction up so far, and that was forward. And then next slide, please. We also had COVID-19. So, and this hit us pretty hard. If you are a 24/7 operator and from one day to another, you go from full speed to zero. This was quite an interesting experience, I have to say. And of course, it's one thing that you need agility there, like Jonathan pronounced. But the other thing that you need is preparation, I think. And this is one thing that we really had at that point of time is we had a plan. We already put a team in place in February, and we felt, okay, there can become something that might be bigger than just closing down one club. Until that time, I think we always had in our heads what will happen if you have an infection in the club, if you have an infection in the team. Nobody else of us really thought it would be that big in Germany that we would come to a full lockdown. But we felt it's becoming more and more serious. Also in February, then it was becoming official that the FIBO would have been postponed. We had big plans for that as well. And we thought, okay, what was going to happen? And okay, to be very honest, we needed our plan that we thought we didn't need. We needed the plan B, which was the emergency plan, and we had to close down all of our stores within 1 week. And for us, that worked quite well. Closing down the clubs was nice. We're actually usually pretty good in opening clubs. But the plan was not ending up with closing the clubs, but then we also started immediately an alternative program. Next slide, please. And the first thing that we did is, of course, we launched our classes. And what we have is we have a brand who is doing all our classes, usually in the FitX clubs ourselves. We produce themselves, we do the music, we do everything ourselves. And so we had a big advantage that we can use our facilities and all our teams now to produce content completely online, completely digital for everybody as an alternative. And what we did there is we didn't take our normal classes that we would give into FitX, because sometimes you need equipment for that, because we thought what's going to happen now during the pandemic is that more and more people, and not only the ones who are used to go to a fitness club, now want to move a little bit more and want to do different things. And so we did also a lot of things that we usually don't do. So we did a lot of stuff for beginners. We did meditation classes, you see here. We did family workouts, especially because in Germany, of course, all the schools were also into lockdown. So you could do sports together with your family. And we experienced two things. And one is we had a very, very positive feedback from our community. So that was used in a very, very well manner. And the second thing was we got a very positive feedback, of course, from the team as well. Because if you also, and like I showed, we have more than 2,600 employees. If you go then from 100 to 0, the people also don't know what to do. And I'm coming back to that as well. And next slide, please. And we didn't just do that for the classes, we also did it for the people in our community who used to train. So we put challenges, digital ones, we put workouts, even high intensity workouts on place. And so, okay, hey, the people are really using it. And like I said, we have been quite successful. Next slide, please. If you look into that, if you look at our social media, next slide, please. If you look at, we had a huge increase nearly in all branches. So YouTube was going up, the views were going up. Our app users, so we have an internal app for FitX members, were going up quite good. Social media followers were going up as well. But there are two sides of a medal, to be very honest. I mean, we were very proud, of course, of the numbers that we achieved, but when the lockdown was taking longer and longer, we also saw that the number were not rising again. That's one thing. And also that all the content that was out there is also growing. So nearly everybody did some content. And my personal opinion, for some of the users, it's quite heavy really to distinguish what's a good content and what's a bad content. And as a matter of fact, there was so much free content out there that it's very, very hard to play an important role there. And this is also why we think for the future we have to take a different strategy there as well. So either we go into paid content maybe, or we just do it for members. So, but this is something that we will definitely learn from this as well. But overall, very interesting experience. And the best one was that we will be able just overnight, and it was nearly 24-hour days then, to put really relevant content on YouTube and online. So that was pretty cool. Next slide, please. And this is something that I would also like to share with you because like I said, in a company like ours, when you have to push the brake so hard, that does something with your employees as well. And also, as Stefan pointed out, we were also putting more than 90% of our people in short work time, which means they were not working at all and got compensated by the state. And we felt that people were really had fear of losing their jobs and so on. And as things were not getting better after the first weeks, we also decided, and we did a very good move there, I think. We did it together with our financial investors, that we said, okay, for each and everyone within the FitX family, we will compensate the complete wage for 100%. And we did this really for everybody, for trainers, for everybody in the headquarters. We did it for the cleaning staff, for everybody. And we have been very honest with the team. We stood in front of them and said, we're going to go through this together. And we do that as long as we can. And if we can't do it, we'll all step back, but not individuals. And I think this also created a very, very cool spirit, which is also taking us now through the times of reopenings, where you see the people were quite motivated. And of course, when the first reopenings were announced, it was at a weekend. But there was no problem to call everybody at a weekend and say, hey, we're going to open on Monday 8 a.m. Again, everybody was in. So also from a company point of view, we really, really learned how important it is to set on the community, on transparency, and really keep them motivated also and keep them informed during that time. Okay, next slide, please. And this is one thing that was the most important lesson that I also learned during the lockdown phase, because after a couple of weeks, it became very, very clear that if we don't do anything, nobody will take care of the fitness branch and say, oh, I think it's a good idea to open fitness again. So nothing really happened. There was no communication. Fitness was simply not on the screen on any politics or so far. And thus there are many reasons for that. One is for sure that nearly every branch was hit very hard. That's clear. And the second one is, I mean, from an association point of view, we have a very scattered landscape in Germany, unfortunately. And some of the big operators are either not represented in one of the associations or didn't feel very well represented. And we started with a small bunch of people, and you see some there on the screen with Fitness First, Extra Fit. And at the beginning, we just exchanged and said, okay, how do you handle this problem and that problem? Because the situation was new for all of us. And then we felt, okay, we really need to do something. And we teamed up with one association with Ralf Scholz and Nils Nagel from DAFG, and said, we really must be active. We must do something. And just the operators you see on screen is nearly 25% of the fitness sector in Germany. And we had two different angles. And the first angle was that we said, okay, we really need a different angle to talk about fitness, because just saying, hey, our branch is suffering because we don't earn any money because you locked down all of our clubs, is what nearly everybody said from other branches. So our angle was quite different, and we tried to say, okay, we can play an important part also during a lockdown because people must move. There are so many bad effects from not moving, from not having an alternative, just to sitting at home and so on, that we did two things. And one thing is we teamed up with the Technical University of Munich, and we let them do an independent study with two different insights, and it's down for free. Everybody can download it. One angle is to say, okay, under which circumstances could you really open up the clubs again? So what has been the hygienic system for that and the baseline? And the second one is, what are also the negative effects, of course, if people don't move anymore? That was one thing. And the second thing is, and you see that on the right-hand side, we did a huge campaign in the big newspapers of Germany, where we basically said, I tried to say for you in English, it basically says, okay, more eating, more alcohol, more frustration, more stress, more aggression, more depression, but all the fitness is closed. Health needs fitness. And that was our angle, how we approached then with both of them, all the politics in Germany. And we started, of course, at very high places in Berlin, down to each and every mayor where we had clubs. We were talking to them, we were writing to them, we explained the concepts to them. And at the end of the day, we have been successful, I have to say. And what is very important is, and this was the first time that I experienced that in Germany, is that it was an effort really of a group of people who let down all their egos, who let down the self-interest and said, okay, this is a point where we all have the same problems. Let's team up. And maybe one had better connections, of course, in Bavaria, others had better ones in North Rhine-Westphalia, and so on. And we really discussed all the strategies, what we can do, and we have been successful. And even, to be very honest, earlier than expected, we were able to open up then in North Rhine-Westphalia as a first one. And basically this was the groundbreaker also for all the other states in Germany. And this is where we are now. So I think we have to be very humble there and also prudent, but we can also be also very happy what we achieved in that short amount of time. But still, of course, we are challenging some challenges here, because what we have right now is a scattered landscape also during the opening. So their regulations are different from state to state, and you have to be very, very agile really to react on that, sometimes on short notice. So what do we see right now if we look into our clubs? Next slide, please. And this slide is from last week, so it's already old again. But yes, we also see a change in member behavior, and basically it's the same also what Stefan also already said. So the visit frequency, of course, is down to 74%. This number is rising literally day by day, but there's also a natural limit to it. And why is that? Is that we still have limitations in the clubs in terms of the equipment. So basically, not every second part of equipment is closed, but nearly. And by law, you can let, let's say, 200 people into the club. But if you have only an equipment of 100 that's free to use for everybody, it doesn't make sense to let so many people into the club. So at least I can only talk for FitX here. We don't do that. So we have an individual number of of limits per club that we let in. So it is even not possible to reach the 100. But what we already see, of course, is that the visits spread now per day. So people come earlier and people leave later. So so that's one of the positive effects. So people are really adopting to the situation. And what was one of the biggest things, of course, is that we were able to offer showers again. So you could use the showers in most of the states right now again. And this also led to a huge increase again. If we look at gender, yeah, the male and younger ones are faster back in the clubs. This is something we definitely see. So this is something where we say, okay, we expected that as well, to be very honest, and now we are working on strategies to get the rest of the pack also back into the clubs. And also, if you look at the occupancy rate of the club visits, it's completely spread throughout the whole week, and this is also including the classes right now. So you don't have any peak days or peaks anymore, but maybe this also has to do with the different living conditions right now. Most people are still in home office mode, so maybe timings are different than now. Sports, also other sport facilities are just opening up again. Schools are still not reopened, or in our case now it's holiday, but also this for sure has some implications on it. And I would like to end up also with an outlook. Next slide, please. And this is something, the crisis is of course not over. And when I look into the market right now, and I look at Germany, I also see it in other countries, is I see a lot of sales happening again already, very much offers. I think it's of course all, and also we suffered financially under the lockdown, really to get more people into the clubs again. And at least I have to say, we won't do that. We are very, very happy that we had so loyal members during the times of the lockdown, and the time slots and the space that we have, we would rather offer to them now than to invest into sales and even boost the clubs anymore. And one thing that's also important is we should also not forget about our employees, because especially the operational stuff in the clubs, they are not doing their job right now, right? I mean, they're fitness trainers, most of them. And right now they are taking care of the hygienic environment. They talk a lot to members. They talk about the fears of the members and so on. And now boosting the clubs again and making them full again at this unsecure stage, I think we shouldn't do as a branch, because I think especially in the politics in Germany, we left right now a very positive picture, also as a professional partner. And we shouldn't play with that and fulfill again the stereotypes of the branch. This is something, but this is also, I have to say, my personal view on things. Yeah, but let's see what will come up. I just hope that we don't have a case of GÜTERSLOH, like Stefan just explained, from the meat producing branch in fitness, and we should all together do everything what's possible to avoid that, not only of course for our branch, but also for the people. And this is just something I want to let anybody know. Yeah, thanks, that's it from my side.
Markus, thank you very much for a very insightful presentation. I'm afraid we're running quite a bit over time, which is fine, but we'll handle the questions we received offline. I would like to thank Stefan, Jonathan, and Markus for their time, their effort in putting these presentations together and sharing their experiences with us. Very much appreciated. And Markus, I'm with you on the teamwork in the industry between operators who normally would be fighting in the streets for getting a location and competing with each other. And Germany is a very good example of that. I've seen the same happening in some other countries, in Holland, in France, in the UK, Spain, where people got together and really joined efforts in defending our industry and trying to get together in safe and sound openings and doing that in a timely fashion. So I hope that cooperation, that collaboration will continue also after the COVID crisis is over, because I think that is has been a very good learning for us in working together and trying to make sure people understand, and politicians and the medical community understands, that fitness is part of the solution and not part of the problem. So with that, I would like to thank you all for listening and viewing. Hope to see you on September 30 in Cologne at the European Health and Fitness Forum, and October 1 to 3 at the FIBO in Cologne. Thanks again. Good luck with your business, and keep up the good work. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very
Bye-bye.
much. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.